You know, they say money doesn't end oppos. T just changed the people who have it. It changes the way the world looks at you. And man, if that ISN end oppos, T the cold, hard truth. I learned that the hard way about 3 years ago when a patch of dirt I'd ignored for a decade suddenly turned into a gold mine, and every vulture in a three-piece suit started circling overhead. My name's Elias, and for most of my life, I was just a guy trying to keep his head above water, working as a junior architect in the city, living in a cramped apartment where the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor's toaster pop. But then my grandfather, Silas, passed away and left me his, kingdom, That's what he called it. But to everyone else, it was just 15 acres of overgrown scrubland and a cabin that looked like it was being held together by hopeful thinking and old spiderwebs out by Blackwood Lake. When I first inherited it, I was 27, drowning in student loans, and honestly, the place felt like a burden, but I remember being a kid there, catching sunfish off the dock while Silas told me that land was the only thing they weren't making more of. So I decided to keep it, spending my weekends hauling away rusted scrap and fixing the roof one shingle at a time. For 10 years, I lived a quiet life, planting a massive organic garden, getting some chickens, and setting up a solar grid because I wanted to be off the map, and for a long time, the world let me be until the developers arrived. It started with a low hum of construction in the distance, and before I knew it, a luxury community called, the Heights at Blackwood, had sprouted up right against my property line like some kind of invasive weed, full of massive white mansions with manicured lawns that looked like they'd been trimmed with nail scissors. I was the lone, eyesore, in their sea of perfection, a guy with a vegetable patch and a coop full of Rhode Island Reds living in a house that didn't end oppos. T-match there, aesthetic vision, And that's when she showed up, Victoria Sterling. I remember the day perfectly. A Tuesday morning, so humid you could feel the air sticking to your lungs, when a silver Porsche SUV pulled up to my gravel driveway, and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd been carved out of ice and dressed in a $1,000 linen suit. She didn't end oppos. T walked so much as glide, clicking her heels across my porch and looking at my hand-carved wooden sign, the one Silas made that said the Reed Refuge, East T 1948, with a look of pure disgust, like she'd just stepped in something. She introduced herself as the president of the Heights HOA, flashing a smile that didn't end oppos. T reached her eyes, and within 5 minutes, she was offering me $3 million to, relocate to a place more suited to my lifestyle, She talked about, community harmony, and, protecting property values, but I could see the gears turning behind those blue eyes. She didn't end oppos. T want harmony, she wanted my shoreline. I told her as politely as I could that my soul wasn't oppos, T for sale, and that this land had more memories than her bank account had zeros, and the way her face shifted, it was like watching a mass crack. She didn't end oppos. TL, she just got very, very quiet and told me that the HOA had, significant influence, with the county, and that it would be a shame if my little slice of paradise became a legal nightmare. And then she just left. A week later, the first patrol car showed up. It was a deputy I'd never seen before, looking embarrassed as he handed me a citation for, unauthorized livestock, nuisance vegetation, claiming my grass was 2 inches over the county limit and that my chickens were a health hazard. I laughed it off at first, thinking it was just a misunderstanding, but then the citations started coming every single day, sometimes 3 at a time. $500 for a, non-conforming mailbox, $1,000 for, improper storage of architectural materials, because I had some lumber neatly stacked for a new porch, and it just kept escalating. I'd wake up to find local code enforcement officers standing in my garden with clipboards, taking pictures of my tomatoes like they were evidence in a murder trial, and Victoria would just happen to be driving by in her Porsche, slowing down to give me that, I told you so, wave. I was losing my mind, feeling like I was being suffocated by paper cuts, until my neighbor from down the road, an old-timer named Miller who'd been an engineer for the state for 40 years, walked over one evening with a 6-pack and a stack of yellowed maps. He sat me down on the dock and told me that the developers weren't into oppos. Just after a nice view. They were after the key. And when I asked him what that meant, he pointed to a spot on the map right under my feet. It turns out when the county built the regional water infrastructure back in the 50s, they'd negotiated a perpetual easement through my grandfather's land. And because Silas was a shrewd old fox, he made sure the deed included, riparian primacy, In plain English, it meant I didn't in oppos. Just owned the land. I owned the legal right to the water flow that supplied the entire valley. And more importantly, the main intake valve for the luxury development and oppos, as private lake and irrigation system was buried right near my chicken coop. If I decided that the easement was being violated or if I needed to perform, maintenance, I could effectively turn off the water to every $1 million fountain and sprinkler system in the Heights. And suddenly, I realized why Victoria was so desperate to get me out. I wasn't an oppos. Just a neighbor. I was the guy holding the leash to their entire, luxury lifestyle, But things got dark before they got better, because when a woman like Victoria Sterling realizes she can in oppos, by you, she tries to break you, and one night in mid-July, I heard the gravel crunch at 3 a.m. I'd already installed a high-end night vision security system because I'm an architect and I'm a bit of a tech nerd, so I pulled up my phone and watched in absolute silence as two guys in tactical gear, hired security from the HOA, climbed over my fence. I watched them walk over to my chicken coop, and I swear my heart nearly stopped when I saw one of them pull out a spray bottle and start dousing my garden with what looked like industrial-grade herbicide, while the other one intentionally broke the latch on my coop and started shooing my birds out into the woods where the coyotes live. They were laughing, taking, action shots, with their phones to document the, strayed livestock, and, dying lawn, to use in court the next morning, but they didn't end oppos. See the tiny 4K lenses tucked into the eaves of my porch, capturing every single second of their faces in crystal clear detail. I didn't in oppos. Go out there with a gun. I didn't in oppos. Yell. I just sat in the dark recording because I knew that in the eyes of a judge, a video is worth more than 1,000 bullets. The next morning, Victoria showed up with a sheriff's deputy. Not the nice one from before, but a guy who looked like he was on the HOA payroll. And she had this fake look of concern on her face, telling the officer that, Mr. Reed's property has become a biohazard, and that the birds were, running wild, She actually had the nerve to say that for the safety of the community, the county needed to seize the land under emergency nuisance laws. But before she could finish her little speech, I just turned my laptop screen toward them. I played the video of her, security team, gassing my kale and releasing my chickens, and the silence that followed was so heavy you could have cut it with a knife. The deputy's face went white, and Victoria's jaw actually dropped, her composure finally shattering like a dropped wine glass. She tried to claim the video was, AI generated, or deep fake, but I just smiled and told her I'd already uploaded the raw, encrypted files to a cloud server and sent copies to the district attorney, the EPA, and the local news station, and then I dropped the real bomb. I handed her a formal, notice of easement revocation, informing her that due to the environmental damage caused by her contractors, the herbicide in my soil, I was shutting down all access to the water infrastructure on my land for a, comprehensive safety audit, effective immediately. You have never seen a person deflate so fast. She knew exactly what that meant. And within 2 hours, the fountains in the Heights stopped spraying, the golf course greens started turning brown under the summer sun, and the wealthy residents started calling the HOA office wondering why their pools were half empty. It was beautiful, poetic justice, but the rabbit hole went even deeper because once the DA started looking into the video, they raided the HOA offices and found a digital trail of breadcrumbs that would have made a mob boss blush. It turned out Victoria wasn't in oppos. Just the HOA president. She was a silent partner in, Grand Horizon Resorts, and they had a secret plan to build a massive 500-room casino and marina right where my cabin stood. They had been bribing a county commissioner to fast-track, nuisance seizures, of holdout properties like mine, and they'd even set up a shell company to buy the land at a, end quote, public auction, end quote, once they'd successfully forced me out. We're talking about racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud, environmental crimes, and witness intimidation, all because they wanted a better spot for a blackjack table. The fallout was a godsend for the evening news, with headlines about, end quote, the lakefront labyrinth, end quote, and, end quote, the HOA queen and oppos, fall, end quote. And by the time the dust settled 6 months later, Victoria was trading her linen suits for a bright orange jumpsuit, sentenced to 7 years in a federal facility for a laundry list of felonies. The development company was hit with an $80 million class action suit from the residents of the Heights who realized they'd bought into a criminal enterprise, and the HOA was legally dissolved, replaced by a resident-led council that actually cares about things like, not poisoning their neighbors. As for me, I'm still here, sitting on my dock, watching the sun dip below the mountains while my chickens, who all made it back safely, by the way, cluck around in a brand-new, reinforced coop. My land is now appraised at nearly $15 million because I'm the only one with guaranteed water rights in the whole basin, but honestly, I don't oppose. Care about the number. I care about the fact that Silas's sign is still hanging on my porch, and the only clicking I hear these days is the sound of the crickets, not Victoria's heels. It makes you wonder, though, how many other people are being squeezed right now by some, end quote, visionary, end quote, developer, or a power-tripping HOA who thinks they own the world just because they have a fancy title and a clipboard. I was lucky because I had the tech and the history to fight back, but most people just fold because the pressure is too much, and it makes me sick to my stomach thinking about how many family legacies have been paved over for a parking lot. So, I want to hear from you guys. Have you ever dealt with a, end quote, Karen, end quote, in a position of power who thought they could bully you off your own property? Do you think I went too far by shutting off the water to the whole community, or was that just the, end quote, find out, end quote, part of, end quote, around, end quote? Let's get into it in the comments, because if we don and oppose, stand up for our dirt, nobody else will. Would you like me to create a visual storyboard for the key scenes of this script, or perhaps refine the legal dialogue in the confrontation scene to make it even sharper?